You are listening to Level Up Your Gaming Podcast, episode 113, Perception Roles and Giving Context. In today's episode, I talk about perception roles and context. I discuss how we often hide information and context intentionally behind these roles. I also discuss why it's generally not a good practice to do. If you'd like to participate in the discussion or leave us feedback, you can contact us at levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. If you like the content and want to hear more of the show, subscribe and will ensure you don't miss an episode. New episodes come out almost every Wednesday. Also, please review, tell a friend about the podcast, or share with your gaming group. Now sit back and enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Level Up Your Gaming Podcast. My name is Aaron. Today, we are going to be talking about perception roles and giving context. But before I do, for some show updates. So, we finally got back to gaming with our group this Saturday. I was so excited to go back and just hang out with Jared and Brian and just do some game. We actually didn't get very far into the game itself, but it was just nice to kind of be back together with the group, and I'm sure next week we'll be more heavy into the gaming aspect of things. It was hard because we've been off for about a week, and you know, with what was going on with Jared, and then Brian got sick, and just all these things. It was just nice to be back at the gaming table. If you've ever been away from your gaming table for a week, you really understand kind of how that is when you have the week-to-week thing, and you're itching to kind of get back to gaming. And it just takes a moment to get everybody back into things. Lots of updates, lots of, you know, what's going on with your life, all that good stuff. So just nice to get back. Wanted to let you guys all know that we're all back. You know, Jared's doing well. I'm excited for him, happy for him, and I'm just excited to be back into gaming. For this podcast, we have I'm going to talk to my friend Tom. He's back this week, and on Wednesday I'll talk to him about doing a recording for either the next episode or the episode after that. It depends. We usually meet up on Wednesdays, and so if we don't meet up on a Wednesday, maybe we can do something on a Thursday. I just have to kind of work it out with him, and we'll figure it out. But I'm hoping that this week I can hash out a time with him. So at most there would be one more episode with just me, and then it'll be Tom, and then sometimes it'll just be me and, you know, the other people in the group as well. So, you know, no real schedule, but just letting you know that might be the first time you hear somebody else coming into that. I also want to say thank you for kind of sticking with the podcast and staying with it. I hope that I am still giving you good information and, you know, being able to provide you good entertainment as you listen to this podcast. I did get word. I actually listened to a podcast, one of my favorites, which is Gaming and BS. And this last episode, they had gone to a bi-weekly format after doing 7 years of week to week to week. They went to a bi-weekly format, and then they just announced that they are going to wrap up the show for good in a couple of years. Not a couple of years, but in a couple of weeks. Sorry, that was my mistake. That episode, that was the big news that was kind of pushed out there at the beginning of their episode, and I just wanted to call out that podcast, let you know about it. It was sort of one of the podcasts that inspired this podcast here, that and some other podcasts, but this was one of the ones where I said, you know, this is something Jared and I could be doing, and, you know, this is, you know, taking our passion for the hobby and then expressing it to you and trying to form and talk with a community. So I hope one day that we are as large and successful as Gaming and BS was. And it's sad to see them go. So go ahead and check them out. It's just a good podcast. Definitely worth the call out for that. That's going to wrap up the announcements. So we're going to go on to the topic. And the topic this week again is perception roles in giving context. And I thought about this on my way home from gaming with Jared. And so here, I'll give it to you. Has this ever happened to you? Is that enemy packing a gun? Roll perception. Critical success. No, you can definitively say he doesn't have a gun. Time passes to the end of the conversation, and then the GM goes, he pulls out his sword and attacks you. You go, he said he didn't have a gun.
He said, well, you never checked for a sword. And so, like, the joke was we were interrogating a guy who was guarding a door, and Jared had rolled a perception roll on me to try and spot my gun, and I stealthily evaded the perception roll. And then I went and I did the perception roll on Jared to see, like, does he have a gun? And I had a really good perception roll. He's like, no, he definitely doesn't have a gun. I'm like, and then I don't know why we weren't being super serious at the time, but I busted out. I'm like, but you didn't notice the sword at his side because you weren't checking for scabbards, or like, you didn't check for nunchaku, and he's swinging them around like crazy. The reason why I kind of bring up this sort of outlandish situation is because as a GM what I asked for in that situation. It wasn't, does he have a gun? It's, I'm checking him for weapons. Okay. And I'm using gun as weapon. In D&D you can use whatever, but it'd be the same thing. Like, does he have a sword? Like, no, he doesn't have a sword, but he has a crossbow that he shoots you with. Like, you wouldn't presume, like, you as a player, you don't presume that the GM is going to give you bad context, or he shouldn't give you bad context. And the same thing goes the other way around, where if I give you, I'm looking for something, the GM knows what you're looking for. So they should be more willing to give you, this is what you get, instead of being like, well, I look in the drawer to see if there are any, like, let's say that you're searching a desk drawer, okay? And what you're looking for, what you need to find is a note in the desk drawer, okay? But you check the desk drawer and you say, does he have any letter openers? No. Does he have any thumbtacks? No. Does he have any, this? Okay, well, aside from asking what's in the drawer, is there anything of note in the drawer? And the GM's like, I don't know. Tell me more about what you're looking for. Like, the GM should just stop right there and go, in my opinion, and be more willing to work with you and go, like, this is what's in the drawer, okay? If you want to explore further, you may ask me about specific items in the drawer. And even then, I might say, you're an adventurer. You're a trained investigator. You have a trained eye for perception. If it depends on the type of role-playing scene that you want to put together, but you should be just giving the player sort of what they want. If they say, I'm going to dig deeper into the drawer, here's what's in the drawer, and oh, by the way, you probably think this is of note. Okay? So I think too often what we do is we say, okay, well, roll me a perception roll, roll me a spot check in that drawer. And then based upon your success or failure of the spot check, I'll divulge the information that may or may not be in there. And even behind that roll, I might say, well, all you discover is that there are these 5 items in the drawer. And it's like, all you're doing is making this unnecessarily complicated to try and hide information at that point. And if you want to hide information, I question what the point of it is. Because the purpose of your players investigating, looking, perceiving things is that your players are going to try and, solve the problem at hand. And unless you don't want your players to solve the problem at hand, you're asking for perception rolls to keep them, at arm's length from the problem. If your problem isn't very complex, and again, you might not think it's complex because you might go, oh my God, you know the problem. Okay, if you're the GM, you know the solution behind what you're doing, and it's kicking you in the face. You're like, this is way too simple. This is so easy. The players know exactly what I need to do. Okay, and you've probably had times in your games where the players make crazy leaps to your answer, and you're just like, I can't believe they made that crazy leap to my answer. Even if you give them all the information, you don't want them to have to make a crazy leap to the answer. You want them to have to make a deduced, carefully thought out leap to your answer, because that's what you eventually want to get to. So I think that you need to be more open to giving information to the players. We started this investigation series a long time ago. I think we talked about improving a mystery in the past when I talked about it with Jared. But this is a big key to it, is that you need to have multiple ways to get to the solution, and you need to be unafraid to give the answer to your players as they search for clues. What is going to happen is, if your story is cohesive and makes sense, the players will eventually connect the dots. Okay? But if your clue is your story can't be about like them investigating a robbery and then they find like a signal flare somewhere along the way and you're like, that's the big clue. And the signal flare says that, the real problem is that somebody's trying to wire the electrical grid in the sewer by posing as some city worker. Okay, that's a terrible connection there. Like, you're never gonna make like that. That requires a leap to get to that piece of information. But if you're going to like work your players through something, and like you got the jewelry store robbery there, and instead of that you find you find the signal flare, and that just kind of leads you to like, oh, the other day there was a there was a city worker who came in here trying to inspect our lights. Like, that's good context and clues, meaning I've now told you who it could potentially be. You have a suspect. You have clues that indicate that the suspect was probably on scene for the jewelry store robbery, and now the players can work their way to find the answer and go, aha, it was the city worker who came in and broke into the jewelry store. But if your clues are so abstract and bizarre, or if you hide them behind things like you don't want the players to, if you feel like the clue is so obvious that the players are going to get the answer, which I'm just trying to tell you that's probably not the case, and you shouldn't worry about that. Okay, but if you're worried about them like finding the signal flare and going, then now they know who did it. Okay, unless they find an ID, the likelihood, number one, to assuage your fears, the likelihood that your players are going to connect the dots immediately, very low. Okay. However, if you hide clues behind a bunch of perception checks, and you hide clues behind a lack of description and context, your players, when they find random things with their perception checks, then they make the leaps. The players know immediately that that's the answer. Okay, that's the failing of giving your players like hiding things from your players. The other thing too is that they can get lost, and then you're totally screwed, and your players miss something. So again, in that combat situation, hilarious, haha. The guy whacks you with a bow staff. Now you're mad at your GM because they hit you with a bow staff or a crossbow or something that you didn't check for because you didn't specifically call it out. The other problem is, let's say that you are another game I had played in. We went up into a bedroom of this guy who had disappeared from this kind of inn or whatever, and he had disappeared, and there was no map or anything, and the description of the room was sort of it was sort of lackluster in terms of like full description of the room. And again, this is context hiding of like the clues that are in the room. And so, where now it's incumbent upon the players to ask you a bunch of questions. They actually need to become, they're filling in your room that you chose not to fill in. Okay. And so unfortunately your descriptions are only as good and filled with context for your clues as the time that you put into the descriptions. It's not the job of the players to fill in the context, the content of the room. So like, if you walk a player into a room and you have something hidden in the desk, the players should not need to say, okay, what's in the room? The GM says, well, it's a bedroom. Okay. So you go, okay, so there's a bed. Okay. Is there a dresser? Is there a closet? Is there a desk? Some bedrooms would have a desk. Like, it's not on the players to figure out all the objects that are in there. The GM should say, you are in a bedroom, there is a bed, there is a desk, there is a closet, there is a dresser, and there's a nightstand. If you want the players to then engage and sort of walk through the investigation of the room, then what you do is by giving them all those things, those are the points of interest. If the players decide to then say, I'll go look at the bed, okay? When the players say they go look at the bed, do not do the thing where you're trying to hide, like, well, you just looked on top of the bed, you didn't look under the bed. Like, you know what the players want to do. They're going to thoroughly investigate the bed. So don't hide, like, that piece of information. Don't take their description literally, because you wouldn't want them to do it the exact opposite way, which is to take your descriptions literally. Okay, you want them to pick up context. Your players fill in context in your descriptions, and you owe it to your players to do the exact opposite thing, which is be kind to the players and be able to express to them, oh, well, these are the things that are in the room. Okay, so that's one way that you can do it. The other way that you can do it is you can play straight perception roll in the room, and you can say, based on how successful you are, this is how many clues I give you. Okay, I don't like that solution. The reason why I don't like that solution, and why our group particularly doesn't like that solution, is because you miss context. Now, the only way to solve that problem is by a good perception roll. Okay? Now, don't get me wrong. The perception roll can be there if your player doesn't want to walk through the investigation of the room. So if they don't want to go check each object, then the perception roll is there. And also, what are the stakes associated to that perception roll? Is your story incumbent upon them finding the bloody knife underneath the bed? Okay? If your story is incumbent upon them finding the bloody knife underneath the bed, to hide it behind the perception roll is basically a dereliction of your duty. You shouldn't do it. Okay? Because they need that piece of information. They need that context to walk into the next clue. And that's the most important thing. You have to let them do that. You don't want to just give them the keys to the kingdom, but you do want to give them the answer. Like, at least I presume that you wish to give them the answer, and you don't want to hide. You might think, well, it's going to be too easy. The moment they find that knife, they're going to know it was carried by the mage Rodrigo, and then they're just going to go attack the mage Rodrigo. They're going to go confront the mage Rodrigo. Pause, time out. You don't know that. You don't know what they're going to do with the information of finding the knife. They might not know it belongs to the mage Rodrigo. Why? Because it has no identification marks to it. They've never seen the mage Rodrigo carry it. However, it is a knife, and other people in the town may know it belongs to the mage Rodrigo. Now you've got yourself a story. Now you've got something that the players can go do. More steps that the players have to work through it. The other thing that you can work other angles. You can work Rodrigo's motivation for why he would have stabbed this person in their bedroom and left the knife in the bedroom. Or, you open up possibility by giving them the knife, by showing them the knife in the perception. You shut the door if you make them basically context fill into a knife. Okay? Meaning, like, there's a bed. Okay, what's on the bed? What's underneath the bed? I go through I see if the mattress has been cut, so somebody maybe slid something inside the mattress. Is there something behind the headboard of the bed? Like, unless you've done this a lot, you can tell that, like, we had to thoroughly kind of work through a situation and had to fill in context. Unless you've done it a lot, your players don't know, and it doesn't make the situation. I'm not saying it doesn't make the situation more fun, because it is more fun once you know what to kind of do, to have that little role play. Like, aha, I figured it out. I realized it was in the bed. Okay, I realized it was behind the headboard. The other thing that this can eventually lead to, and I'll kind of go into the just say yes and how you kind of role play this out, is this can lead to the players providing you something that you had not thought of contextually, and that you can now add to the room that gives them a clue. It's a better place for the clue. So let's say they haven't found the knife underneath the pillow or underneath the bed, but your player checked inside the mattress. Aha, that's where Rodrigo actually hid the knife. I don't want it to be under there anymore. I want it to be in there. And now it's just like your players, feel like Sherlock Holmes. I just pulled this knife out of this bed. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Like what are the odds that I kind of can't? There's a level of magic in sort of fancy dancing your description into a better outcome based upon what the players did. You were going to give them the knife in the room anyways. So where that knife existed in the room is irrelevant. Okay, I might as well tell you, you walk into a room and there's a knife in the room. Because that's what I want you to know. That's the vanilla, no frills description. But the real description that I want you to do is I want you to kind of see the motivation. Like, why would he have hidden it there? Or maybe he dumped it behind the headboard, thinking, "Aha, no one will see it there. It's very quick and dirty." Or he did a sloppy job of cleaning up the knife. Like there's a lot of things that are added by having the players sort of role play their way into the room. But at the end of the day, they get to the context piece that you want to give them, which is, this is the knife that Rodrigo has. Like this is the knife. This is the clue. Okay. I can give you a bunch of other clues in the room as well, but I need to make sure that you find the damn knife. So that this is something that I can build a lead off of. This is something I can draw context from. Not that I just didn't have to didn't have to do a perception roll to kind of figure it out. Or I didn't, but if your players are totally stumped, you let them use the perception roll. Let them go through it, but do it more on a pass-fail basis. You don't want to and let all the players roll it. Okay? And unless somebody critically fails, like a 1 or something, if you are playing critical failures, let the players roll it again at some point. There is no... I believe we talked about completeness of something and trying to let people know when... Or I talked about when enough is enough in investigation. This can help alleviate some of that by just getting them through the entire clue, or if they roll another perception roll, you found everything. Okay? So unless they fail their way out of it, then, don't let them do it again. Let them give you a reason why maybe they've found context to search again. Let them find meaning to keep rolling perception rolls. Not just endlessly rolling perception rolls, but, just make it so that, they eventually can find the item, within reason. You don't want them to roll perception roll 100 times, although to fail a perception roll 100 times would be insane. I'm sure, somebody is going to be able to write into levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com and explain how their friend one night failed 100 perception rolls and they just couldn't find their way out of a bucket. So you let me know if that's too unreasonable. But at the same time, if you start doing perception rolls, just, I don't know, you can take 10. You can do passive perception, unless it's so hidden. Okay, unless it's literally like it is the answer, like that. This is the thing that says this is the guy that did it. Okay, on night 1, day 1, this thing is the thing that said I did it. Don't hide it. Same thing goes for the guy carrying the weapon. Don't feel like you need to hide it. Okay, if the guy has a weapon, the player rolls a good perception roll, or the player, in that case, the player would roll a perception roll because there's stakes involved in it. You're trying to search for a weapon. Our recommendation would be use a perception roll there. But let's say the player succeeds. Tell him, no, he's got a weapon. Okay, not he's got a sword. Okay, because you looked for a sword, but you said you didn't say bow staff. And he has a bow staff, and you're just blind to bow staffs today. Let him know. Let him know that has happened. That you don't. You're not trying to trick the players. I mean, maybe some GMs are, but you shouldn't be trying to trick your players. You want them to come back next week and engage in the things that you are doing. So give them the context. So I guess the final thing on this is, how we kind of work through this. So we talked about the just say yes method, and that has worked wonders in our games. It has decreased the number of rolls that experts would need to make. And so in a D&D game, everybody's an adventurer. Okay? So, anything that would be commiserate with being an adventurer would make you an expert. So unless there's a stake involved in it, meaning like if I do this, there could be consequences to the action, you should just kind of work through and just be like, yep, no, that you start to find this, you start to find this, you start to find this. And what you're going to find is that you'll write better descriptions to kind of obfuscate the really important things in your game. The problem is that a lot of GMs will write a description that's like, you go into the room, you do this, you find this, and you find a book. Okay? Like you always end on the object of desire. And now you've totally missed the brief. You might as well just say you go into a room, you find a book. Like that's effectively your description. Everything else before it was fluff to get to, and there's a book. Okay? You don't need to flood the room with objects. You don't need to say it's adorned with candelabras, and there's a family crest on the wall, and a painting of this woman who's in a light teal dress, and there's opulent stones cast across the. You don't need to be doing all these kind of crazy descriptions to just hide a bunch of things in the room. But, maybe throw out 3 or 4 objects that might be of interest to a player. Let them kind of work through it and see if they can put 2 and 2 together. The other thing, too, is one of the other things I really like about the Just Say Yes method is it invites the players to look deeper into something. And in this case with perception, instead of having the players roll perception over and over and over and over again, you can invite the players to do something. It's like when you come into the bedroom, you could say, okay, you walk into a bedroom, there is a bed, there is a desk, there is a closet, there is a dresser. 4 objects. So when the players decide, you start going around the room, what do you do? Steve goes, oh yeah, I go over to the bed. I'm going to take a look at the bed. Okay. This is an opportunity where you could say, I'm going to make Steve roll a perception roll on the bed. I gave him the general rule, but I'm going to make him roll a perception roll. Or you could not, and I would say don't have him roll a perception roll. How consequential is him finding something potentially useful in the bed for you to, have to hide it behind a perception roll? Okay. And also, if you do hide something in the room behind a perception roll, but nothing else has a perception roll, the players you're giving away the game at that point too. So I would say either go everything's a perception roll in the bedroom, or nothing's a perception roll, and the players can maybe ask more clues and context. So you could say you look over the bed, you look under the bed, you look in the sheets and all that. You can't find anything. Now, you might say, well, the person keeps a diary in their bed. It's inconsequential to the mystery itself, but it is a nice little Easter egg for the motivation of the person who was stabbed in this case. So you might say, so you might go, okay, well, did I miss anything else? And you go, I don't know. You can roll a perception roll for me. And then if he finds the diary, there is some consequences because there's more meat and potatoes with the story. It's not a necessary object to forward the story. It is a sort of side object that gives more, more creativity and more life to the world that you've sort of created and the person that you're having them investigate. But the other thing that you could do is you could just have people say like, okay, I look at that, I look at this, I look at this, and you give them the descriptions of things that are there. And what you probably are going to get if you are just kind of dialoguing it with your players, especially in perception cases like this, is that your players will ask more about each individual piece of the description. Now, at this point, now you're flying from the hip because you're a GM. You don't, good luck if you said that they found a stack of papers and it's a report and you have the report written down. Okay, don't get me wrong, Jared has done crazy crap like this before, but I don't expect any other. I don't do this, so I don't expect other GMs to do it either. But if they pull up the report, you might say, or let's say you're in an office for some reason, and the person is there, and you're like, this is various documents like bills and stuff like that, and somebody might go, well, this investigation surrounds a landowner and something happened with him. So does he have like any, you might ask questions about like who are his customers, and like because you're trying to draw context out of his business to find the direction of like who maybe would have come in and robbed this man or whatever it might be. And you as a GM probably never thought of that. You're like, that's not how I thought you were going to figure this out. I thought you were going to go to the town hall and ask Cindy for records, and Cindy was going to show you that Mr. Blumenthal is 10 years behind on taxes or something, whatever that might be. But you're right, he might have a bunch of past due bills in his drawer, and that might be enough of a context. Could you save the players a step in doing that and also reward your players? Your players won't know you're rewarding them, but that creativity in asking about the documents might be enough to say it would make sense to fill in that context and also give you that clue that you were likely going to get in another place. So it's a way to sort of invite players into perception and working your way through combing through a room or combing through a dungeon room, because you're now, instead of just doing perception roll, this is what you find, or this is what's in the room, and I'm going to hide things in the room unless you give me the context to fill it out. This gives the players sort of an inviting way to kind of walk into. You're not just giving them everything up front, but you're allowing them to kind of find the answers themselves. And this was sort of the first time that we did the just say yes thing. This is the exact feedback I gave back to Jared, which was, you got to give us a little bit of like wiggle room to be able to kind of invite our way into an object. It's like I can spotlight 4 objects in a room, and then you can bring the spotlight and super focus it on one object. So we're going to magnify that. Okay, there's some things on the desk. Okay, open the drawers. Things are happening. Now I can give you more descriptions. It's sort of kind of a dialogue into how I perceive the desk. And it's then I'm working my way into the clue as a player, and the GM is inviting me to look at the things that I've illuminated within the room as well. So context is fully fleshed out, and the players, assuming they are thorough by looking at all the items and walking into and zooming in and focusing on the items, they will find the answers that they look for. So that's just a little bit of my thoughts on perception rolls and context, and trying not to hide things from your players. Just don't be afraid to give your players the answers is basically what this is the TLDR of this podcast. Don't be afraid to give your players the answers, even if that means that like your players are going to realize NPC has a weapon. This is the murder weapon. This is the thing that links us to the other person, to the person we need to find. Don't be afraid to give your players that. That's what you want to do. And then it gives the players the ability to make that leap to that person, place, thing, whatever it may be, and be able to forward your story. And you'll see like it becomes a more greased machine when the players are making those connections and they're not sitting there struggling and table talking and trying to debate their way through stuff. Okay, it just makes for a more smooth execution. So don't be afraid to give the players the answers, is what it comes down to. But anyways, it's going to wrap up the episode here. So if you got some thoughts on perception rolls, maybe you have different rules for running the perception rolls. Maybe there's a way that you like to run an investigation into something. Maybe you have had a situation where a GM has screwed you over because you didn't specifically ask for the one thing that you need to notice on the map or in the description itself. Let me know. levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. We are also, this podcast is also on YouTube, so smash the like button on YouTube if you are listening to it there. Otherwise, go ahead and subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, 5-star review, anything that you can do to help the podcast, share with a friend, all that other good stuff. And that's going to wrap me up for the week. So I will talk to you guys later. Have a great week.